Greetings, travelers. I'm your host, the C-Dot that knows a lot, Dr. Waluigi. One of the most iconic animated fantasy characters of the 1980s was He-Man. He-Man was one of the first characters from the 80s I saw, and he became one of my favorite superheroes. Sadly, he's become a joke in the more recent years, as well as the subject of much hate throughout the animation community. However, instead of looking at how he became a silly joke and honestly an annoying meme, I want to take a look at every single show as well as the She-Ra series and movie to show you guys that there is more to this character than just the jokes and memes that people have come to know him. So let's delve into the golden era of the 1980s as we cover the original He-Man series. Just like any TV series that was made in the 80s, the show was based on the toy line that was created by Mattel, the creators of the Barbie toy line. This was Mattel's attempt to appeal to boys as they had already appealed to girls from Barbie. Mattel hired the animation company Filmation to create an animated series for the toy line, which became the first cartoon that was ever based on a toy line. So if you ever want to know what series started the idea of being based on a toy line, like Transformers or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, this is the series that started it all. The series lasted for 2 seasons with 65 episodes in each season before the show was eventually cancelled due to the low sales of the toys, which led to many weird choices by Mattel, who tried to bring the popularity of the toys back by creating the spin-off She-Ra and the live-action movie. Yeah, this was a very common thing that happened in the 80s. If the toy line wasn't successful or was dwindling in sales, the television show would get cancelled and sometimes end with no conclusion because the studios would just get told to stop working on the show and then move on from that. But even though the show was cancelled, many people, including myself, remember it for its campy style, a cast of memorable characters, and a well-thought-out plot. On the distant planet of Eternia lives a young prince named Adam. Adam is one of the protectors of Eternia's greatest secret, which is held in the ancient and mysterious Castle Grayskull, and is the home of one of the most powerful magic users on Eternia, the Sorceress. With the power of Adam's sword of power, he is able to transform into Eternia's greatest champion, He-Man. Along with his other friends, Adam defends Eternia and its people from the evil sorcerer of Snake Mountain and his masters of evil, Skeletor. Because this show had such a large cast of characters that were introduced from the toy line, I will only be focusing on the major characters of the series from both the heroes and villains. However, that doesn't mean that those characters are weak in any way, it's just easier to talk about the characters that play an important role in the story. Let's begin with our heroes, the Masters of the Universe, starting with... Prince Adam, aka He-Man, voiced by John Irwin. Adam was the young and naive hero of Eternia. He was written like Superman, where he had to appear dumb to his friends and family, but was quick-witted and a great fighter. While not the most original character compared to today's media, back then this type of character was very common in the sci-fantasy genre. The original He-Man isn't that complex or unique compared to others that have been made, but what I do like about him are the 2 things the writers gave him as a character. The first was his compassion to help others, whether they were villains or just terrible people, and his naivete, which showed the character wasn't all-knowing and needed to learn just as much as any other person. For a young kid, having these qualities meant that you could relate to the character and look up to them as a hero. Cringer, aka Battle Cat, voiced by Alan Oppenheimer. Cringer was a green and orange striped cat that was rescued by Adam from a saber cat. He was raised by Adam, who eventually discovered that he was He-Man, who accidentally used the magic of the Power Sword to turn him into the mighty steed of He-Man, Battle Cat. Cringer was honestly one of the more annoying characters in the series for always complaining and whining about having to turn into Battle Cat and would often run and hide from danger. He did have some good episodes occasionally, but eventually I got sick of his whining and just wanted him to turn into Battle Cat by the end of the episode. It didn't help that Oppenheimer may have made his Cringer voice a little too grating and whiny, but I will say that he's not the most annoying character in this show, and we will get to her in a moment. But first... Man-at-Arms, aka Duncan, voiced by Alan Oppenheimer. Get used to me saying that, folks, as a lot of the voice cast is done by the same 5 people so that the studio could cut costs on hiring multiple actors. Duncan was Adam's mentor who helped guide him into the man he would later become through his teachings of academics, science, battle, and strategy. One of the things I think makes Duncan stand out as a character is that he was always learning new things alongside Adam. While he was still a wise mentor to Adam, he always wanted to know more about Eternia and many of its secrets. Which is why in many of the episodes, he and Adam would go to ancient ruins or a place on Eternia that he heard of but knew nothing about, and would go to learn more about the ancient civilizations. You could tell that while the writers wanted to make him the mentor, that didn't mean he was all-knowing, and would often be stumped and awed by what he saw on their adventures across Eternia. Orco, voiced by Lou Scheimer. Orco was a magician from the planet Tila who came to Eternia by accidentally entering a magic portal. After saving Adam, he was made court magician and helps the masters whenever he can. Many fans of the series have considered Orco to be one of the most annoying characters in animation, to the point that people have compared him to other annoying characters such as Scrappy-Doo. In my opinion though, Orco was a much more helpful character than people might remember, and was more helpful to the team than someone like Scrappy-Doo. True, he did have some episodes where he acted dumb, but he was never a hindrance to the team and would often get the group out of trouble, unlike the last character on this list. Tila, voiced by Linda Gary. Tila was the captain of the Royal Guard and the adopted daughter of Man-at-Arms. She always wanted to prove herself to others as this strong and independent woman who could beat any man in combat. Unfortunately, she is one of the many characters that is full of hot air and would constantly get kidnapped by the villains or at least knocked out. In my opinion, she could have been a great character. After all, the 80s gave us many great female animated characters like the Baroness from G.I. Joe or Chitara from Thundercats. But unlike those characters who had likable personalities and could keep up with the men around them, Tila would blow air out of her butt and brought nothing to the team. When it comes to the villains, many of them were written as these big dumb muscular men that had very little to no personality. So while there were a lot of villains throughout the show because of the toys, I will only focus on 3 of the villains that appeared the most in the show, as they were the ones that got major focus or because they stood out from the others. Skeletor, voiced by Alan Oppenheimer. Skeletor was a powerful sorcerer that resides in the horrifying Snake Mountain. He wanted to conquer Eternia and rule with an iron fist simply because he wanted to. I know that many people might get turned off by that explanation, but back in the 80s, that was just the way things were for most villains. They just wanted power because they wanted it. There weren't any betrayals, rejections, or any of those pesky story-driven villains that had a deep and complex reason for being evil, and that's okay. Sometimes it's nice just to have a villain be evil just to be evil and enjoy their evilness. Which is why I love Skeletor, for just how much he loves being evil and revels in it, that it becomes intoxicating and you end up laughing alongside him. Evelyn, voiced by Linda Gary. Evelyn was Skeletor's pupil and second in command who would often betray him if it suited her needs. Honestly, what made her stand out from the other villains was that Evelyn was the only girl in the villains group. Unlike the spin-off series She-Ra, which had many female villains as well as male villains, He-Man only had Evelyn as its reoccurring female villain, while only having one-off female villains in the rest of the show. This didn't detract from her character though, as she was still an interesting character when she was doing her own thing, as she would often have better plans than Skeletor and would come closer to winning. But I did lose interest when she had to work with Skeletor. Beastman, voiced by John Irwin. Beastman was basically one of the many muscle characters that Skeletor hired. His only other character besides being the dumb muscle was to overthrow Skeletor and take over as the leader of the Masters of Evil. This is what I was talking about when it comes to the original villains, where the only way you can tell them apart, besides their design, is that they all have different powers and abilities that fit their element. Trapjaw was known as being able to create many weapons, Beastman could control all animals, and Merman was Merman, that was hydrokinetic and could control the aquatic creatures of Eternia. It makes it hard to mention any of those characters since they are all muscle and don't have much of a personality that stuck with them, which made the one-shot villains stand out more as they would have better plans for controlling Eternia. Despite the weaknesses of the villains, the rest of the writing is handled pretty well and is the strongest part of the original series. Considering that Filmation ended up hiring some of the greatest writers of the 80s and 90s, including but not limited to J. Michael Straczynski, Paul Dini, Larry DiTillo, and David Wise, all of whom have gone on to create some of the greatest TV shows of mine in future generations. Seriously, I cannot stress how important these guys were in helping many cartoons get made to the high standard we have today, which made the characters and episodes stand out more and is what kept many kids, including myself, coming back and re-watch the series to see what new adventures would await us. Even though this series did have some great world building and many entertaining episodes for everyone to enjoy, I can't say that the animation has held up compared to modern animated series. One of the things that fans of this show and even critics have pointed out is the stiff and repetitive animation of the characters, which isn't the fault of the studio, as this was the best kind of animation we got at the time. Even other series have the same problem with awkward and disjointed animation that everyone has pointed out. However, this doesn't bother me, as I feel the animation gives the show its charm and helps distinguish the series from other series at the time, unlike today's animated series where everything looks the same and you can't distinguish much of the shows other than the background designs. While this series may not be everyone's cup of tea, I still love this series for the world building and the memorable characters. I can't say that the animation is the best, but I personally enjoy it for just how vibrant and different the backgrounds are. If any of you have the chance to look it up, the whole series is on YouTube and available on DVD. I'd say check out this classic show from the golden age of animation. You won't be disappointed. I give the original He-Man an 8 out of 10. This is a show that definitely still has the power. Well, thanks for watching. I'm Dr. Waluigi, and remember, don't judge a book by its cover, cause you'll never know what's inside. Good night, everyone.